And that's an unfortunate scenario, because what made America great, if you look at the 50s and the 60s and maybe even into the 70s, what made America great is we had such a strong middle class. And that's going away. That's what made it possible to own a home at a certain price. That's what, when our parents grew up, that's the scenario that made the American lifestyle pretty great, is because the middle class had money.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Glick. We have an industry news episode for you today, and joining me, as always, is Charles Covey. Charles, how's it going?
Hello, hello.
So I've been out of town the last week up in northern Minnesota doing some fishing, doing some reflecting on things, and it was good to get away. But while I was away and looking at the various articles and things going on in the industry, there's a lot going on. We have the government shutdown that's taken place. We've got just additional impacts to the housing market around. We've got an article we're going to cover related to millennials stepping out of the housing market and potentially Gen Z stepping into the housing market. And then also we have the lawsuit against Zillow and Redfin over rental listings that we're going to dig into. So a lot of wild stuff going on in the industry, and we're going to dig into that stuff here now. So let's go ahead and get into our first article, which comes to us from the National Association of Home Builders. Headline reads, "How the Government Shutdown Will Affect Housing." In the short term, the effects are expected to be minor, but the risks will grow if the shutdown continues for an extended period. New flood insurance policies through the National Flood Insurance Program are suspended, which is delaying home sales in flood-prone areas. FHA loans are still being processed, although at a slower pace, and HUD has paused new multifamily commitments. Most rural housing loans and grants through the USDA are on hold, though some previously approved commitments are still moving forward. The Small Business Administration has stopped issuing new loan guarantees. OSHA and the Department of Labor have limited enforcement and are delaying foreign labor certifications. Permitting by the EPA, Department of the Interior, and Army Corps of Engineers is delayed until funding resumes. The IRS has paused income verification requests, which may slow down mortgage approvals. And generally, overall, the longer the shutdown lasts, the greater the delays will be for closings, financing, and permitting across the housing and development sectors, primarily with respect to federal government loans and projects. What are your thoughts on this, Charles? Do you think this is something that is going to continue for a long period of time?
Well, I didn't know that this government shutdown thing had happened so many times before. So as we looked up this chart that shows, hey, this happened a whole bunch of times. My political interest has only been since whatever I was a teenager and on. So I've only seen it happen 3 times, 13, 18, and 19. So to me, it just seems like, oh my gosh, this is such a crazy anomaly that this is happening, when in fact, it's happened a whole bunch of times through different administrations, both sides of the aisle. So it is not quite as big of an anomaly, although there's obviously contextual things around each one of those occurrences. You notice, though, on the chart, it tends to be a longer and longer thing in the modern day, since the 90s. The unfortunate thing is, it seems to me like this is mostly political theater. There's plenty of other ways we could get this done and avoid it if we wanted to. But both sides want to create the theater, and it's good for views and clicks. And, there's no such thing as bad publicity, as they say. So there's lots of publicity around this. And it feels like that's the reason. So whenever they've had enough publicity and everybody's gotten their time and on camera, and everybody has gotten the feelings that they want to feel, they'll get this solved.
Hopefully it doesn't have much of an impact for our listeners, but it is something that we'll continue to keep an eye on. And I think it's important for our industry in general. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment, which is from the comments. I've got a few of them here because we had quite a few comments. First one comes to us from YouTube, and this was in response to the podcast episode that was recorded with Peter Schiff last week. And this one comes from Brooks FW. His comment is, "He is only correct in a portion of his analysis. Being a home builder, not an analyst, I can tell you he has many of his underlying assumptions wrong. Home construction costs are not up year over year for the most part." So the only thing, I don't know where Brooks FW is from. So the only thing I can think is he's from an area of the country where they haven't seen as big of impact on building costs and everything. But in general, at a high level, costs are up. year over year. So, in the whole, it's up, but maybe not in the area of the country wherever Brooks FW is coming from. So I just wanted to make that note there. All right, a couple more here. This one comes from Jack Rowe on LinkedIn. Man, oh man, I'm not full of it when I say I've been thinking about reaching out to you to see if you could get Schiff on for another episode. Big leagues. Well, I appreciate the love, Jack, and that's pretty cool that you were wanting to see him back on, and then sure enough, we were able to get him back on the show. And last one here comes to us also on LinkedIn from Juan Valles. Subscribing now. Thank you for this great content. So love the comments, guys. Keep them coming. Love the support. And with that said, let's go ahead and move on to article number 2, which comes to us from Fox Business. Headline reads, Millennials are quitting the housing market, but Gen Z is stepping in. The Big Money Show panel discusses the challenges of homeownership amid an affordability crisis. So this one's a long video that we clipped out the first minute and a half from it. So if you want to watch the whole thing, as always, the links to every article we cover, you can find on the show notes page. But this video in total ends up being about 10 minutes, but we're only going to listen to the first minute 30 here, and then we will discuss.
Well, the pressure of owning a home is showing up in Americans' internet history. New Google Trends data shows that search activity for the words help with a mortgage hit the highest level since 2009 last month. And many Americans feel owning a home isn't attainable. 16% of people looking for a house since 2020 have abandoned their search entirely, especially millennials. But could there be hope with young people? Gen Z is now the most likely generation to be on the prowl for a house. So Steve Forbes, I come to you on this. Housing. We talk about this all the time. People giving up, people losing hope, mortgage rates. I think it's sad when young America says I can't do a house. And I'm not saying everybody in the world wants to buy a house, but it is such an essential building block of growing up, of owning something substantial. What do you make of this? And where do you think the hope lies right now?
Well, I think the hope lies in several things. One is a stable dollar, so we get low interest rates, more tax cuts, so people have more to keep, and also you get a more ginned up economy. Very basic. And the other thing I hope the administration will be focusing on more is pinpointing areas of the country where regulations prevent housing developments from being brought to fruition. Contrast a piece of Texas with a piece of California and say, why does it take 3 months in Texas to do a housing development versus 3 years or 30 years in California? Since we have a governor out there who has aspirations, let him explain why California is the most expensive place to buy a house, how you can get a mansion in a place like Florida or somewhere else, even with the prices today, and get you a closet in California. Then they always say, oh, we'll have public housing and affordable housing. It's government that made housing unaffordable. Yeah. So highlight the information, and that'll put pressure to get some change.
His focus was really on the government getting in the way when it comes to it. Something we've talked about a lot with trying to find ways to make it easier, less red tape for developers and builders to build homes to help reduce the cost that way. The opening, they talked about the numbers and percentages with millennials and Gen Z. I don't know that, this last week when Peter Schiff was on, he was really focusing on, people are just not going to be able to afford homes. So I don't know what gives in all of this. What do you think, Charles? I mean, are we really going to see the government get out of the way and allow us to build these homes at a lower price?
They say that up to 30% of the cost of a new home is government problems slowing down the process. And depends on how you figure this, right? But part of that would be, just look at the processes that we do as developers. Let's say we go buy a piece of land for $1 million. Might take us a year and a half. We get it entitled. Now it might be worth $10 million. And it seems like, oh my God, how can you guys make $9 million for that? Just for that? Well, because it is a problem, and you've got to put capital on the line, and capital has to sit, and it's the time value of money. That whole process there, if we didn't have to do all of those efforts and fight with a municipality and deal with all of these things, now you'd have that $1 million parcel. You could develop it at $1 million instead of at the $10 million number post entitlement, right? So that's where that number comes from. And absolutely, for sure, in the land cost, it's a big component. Now, you've also got the element with permits and waiting on the city, and there's some drag there that happens in the vertical portion and the horizontal portion, but it's the majority of that is in the land piece. So is it possible in theory? Of course it's possible in theory. Is it likely? I think probably not. I think most likely the scenario is what has happened in most other developing societies. In America, we're still young. We're still babies, right? We've been doing this for a couple hundred years. And you look at societies that have been doing this for many hundreds of years, and a lot of them do rent, right? If you go to, okay, we'll use Paris, for example, or London is another good example. Not a lot of homeowners. It's unbelievably expensive. It's just unrealistic to do so. So you rent. Does it seem like we're trending more towards that scenario than fixing it? Yes, that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, that's you had shared a post on LinkedIn with me sometime over the last week, and it was, I wish I had pulled it up here because I'd like to give credit to the person who mentioned it. I can't remember who it was though, but he was talking about how everybody he talks to who's in the market, all they keep talking about is the challenges they're having with all of the expenses in their life continuing to increase. I mean, I don't know about you, but pretty much every single, it feels like this last week, I received probably 3 or 4 emails from service providers that I currently am subscribed to, all telling me that they're raising rates. And that just keeps happening. And so we hear from the government and just other people saying, hey, everything's great. This is the best economy ever. But then when you talk to the everyday people who are out there living, it sure doesn't feel that way. Maybe the market is way up, but we've always talked about how the market can be very misleading.
And everybody that you talk to is saying the same thing. Everybody I talk to is saying the same thing. All the staff that work for me, same situation. So then you look at where the numbers are coming from that are saying the economy is doing so well. You've got a stock market and all this AI investment that's happening. A lot of that is money just chasing each other around, right? This company invests in that company, invests in that company, invests in that company. The money just made a circle, but it technically counts toward all of this big number, right? This counts toward GDP, even though that money's not doing much. So, and that's money passing between people who don't need the money. It's not going to people who could actually spend it. Not to say that rich people shouldn't have money. They earned it, they can have it. But I'm saying on the people that are doing most of the work, they're still struggling, and it's not very complicated. You don't have to look at GDP and say the economy is doing good. You should look at wages in relation to the prices of normal goods, and that is a big, big problem. So you studied that particular chart, and we probably should bring that up next time because I think that's a good one. We've studied wages in relation to housing cost, and wages in relation to common goods is another huge one. And I think if you look at those charts, that tells the picture that you're describing, not looking at GDP and all these other things, what the stock market's doing, because that money's going to people who generally have lots of it anyway. So essentially, if we're going to boil all this down, what we're seeing is a greater separation between those that have a lot of money and those that don't. And that's an unfortunate scenario because what made America great, if you look at the 50s and the 60s and maybe even into the 70s, what made America great is we had such a strong middle class. And that's going away. That's what made it possible to own a home at a certain price. That's what, when our parents grew up, that's the scenario that made the American lifestyle pretty great, is because the middle class had money. And we're seeing this big disparity between the haves and have-nots. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And that's a scenario that seems to happen in most maturing societies when they act this way. So unfortunately, that's not a good scenario for us over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 decades.
Yeah, and you talked about the AI boom, and something that was mentioned last week from Schiff is that NVIDIA invested or has committed and invested $100 billion into OpenAI, and so his comment was, so you have NVIDIA giving this money to OpenAI for OpenAI then to pay NVIDIA back with its own money that is invested to pay for servers and the processing power and everything for AI.
It's back and forth, round and round.
Yeah. So it sure feels like it's just waiting to, for a bubble to pop at some point here with all of this AI money that's going crazy. So I don't think it's necessarily looking good for the market as a whole. And we have a couple of charts here I was going to pull up as well. So something you've talked about a lot is, we need a way to help with the affordability issue is getting back to building homes at more realistic sizes like we used to have back back in the 50s, 60s, and so on, because I believe we had larger families back then in living in the homes, but we had smaller houses. And now we have smaller families, but we have bigger houses. And so this graph right here shows the change in size from 2016 to 2024. Not a massive decrease, but there is some decrease here that maybe shows signs of us starting to head in that direction.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'd love to see this going further back, because I saw a stat not long ago that talked about, it actually showed a photo of Manhattan, and it kind of from Central Park south, towards Wall Street, and it was showing the big difference of the way it looked then. Mostly lower rise buildings, less than a handful of stories tall, not all the skyscrapers and the super talls that you have now. But what it was saying in the photo is that the picture that looked more dense actually had a higher population by a notable amount than the picture now that has way more square footage, like multiples in square footage higher. But yet there were more people then, because you had more people and more people per square foot times a multiple. And I think that's really fascinating. So it's fascinating. That's kind of a microcosm of the scenario that we're in, that we're doing a whole lot less with the space that we have. And we feel like this whole need to be so spread out, and it does feel good. You walk into a home and like, look at all this space that I have. And we've told ourselves that we need to feel that feeling. And I'm thinking maybe that's something that's building on itself and has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And we kept thinking we need more and more and more. It does appear that that's reversing, and it certainly needs to, if we're going to chase this affordability issue.
And I lied. I guess we have one more chart here. This one shows, and I don't have a lot of context around this one, so I'm basically going to talk about it, but I don't have a lot of reasoning behind it. But this one shows that there's an increase in the number of single-story homes being built and a decrease in the number of two-story homes being built. I was speculating before we started recording that maybe this has to do with a change in the type of family that's living in these homes. Like, are there more elderly people living with their children? And so single story makes that easier than dealing with stairs in a two-story home. But that's pure speculation. I don't have any data on that.
What I would love to see, Ryan, let's see if we can get listeners to participate here. We have a couple of theories. My theory was possibly that maybe the number of two-story homes didn't go down, but that it's growing at a lower rate than the single-story homes, only because maybe that portion, maybe we're doing more starter type homes that happen to generally be ranch style single-story, and maybe that was the reason. So I'm just very curious if listeners can comment and participate on this. I would love to get some feedback. This is a really good one that we just don't know the exact reasons. There's clearly a story behind the numbers, and we would love to understand the story better. So if you have ideas on what you think this might be, what the reasons might be, I would love to see in the comments, and we'll talk about that in the next one.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get to our final article for this episode. This one comes to us from Reuters. Headline reads, U.S. states sue Zillow, Redfin over rental listings. 5 states, Virginia, Arizona, Connecticut, New York, and Washington, have filed an antitrust lawsuit against Zillow and Redfin. The states allege Zillow paid Redfin $100 million to exit the rental advertising market. The agreement required Redfin to stop taking contracts with large property managers, stay out of the rental ad market for 9 years, and only show rentals that Zillow also listed. Regulators argue this reduced competition, raised advertising prices, and cut innovation incentives. Zillow and Redfin argue the deal benefits property managers and renters by expanding reach and visibility. Redfin said it is confident it will prevail in court. Redfin is now owned by Rocket Companies as of July 2025. Zillow also faces a separate lawsuit from Compass, accusing it of trying to monopolize private home listings. When I saw this, it just seems like Zillow and Redfin continue to be in the news. I don't know what's going to come out of this, but I would definitely be interested in people who are listening in who use these services. Is what Zillow and Redfin are saying here, do you find that to be true? Do you think that you're getting better deals as property managers, or do you think if they were competing against each other, would you get better, a better deal?
This one's fascinating to me. I'm really curious to see how this shakes out. I don't have much of an opinion on it, though.
All right. Well, that brings us to an end here. Before getting some final thoughts from you, Charles, I just wanted to mention for all of you listening in, If you head over to landdevpodcast.com, we just actually moved everything over to its own website there, so you can see all of our prior episodes are going to be there. You'll see some details. You can also, join our email list that we have there in order to be kept up to date when we release new episodes and everything, and also any events that we might be doing here in the future. Check that out and go ahead and head over there and sign up. Charles, what any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Continues to be absolutely fascinating to be in this business, and I'm grateful that we have this forum, because a lot of people that are in this business, and I know I felt this way, felt like I was on a bit of an island. And yeah, I had some other people in the business that I could talk to, but broadly getting information wasn't available. So I'm really grateful for what this does for me for getting info, and I think there's a lot of people that listen that that are grateful to have a community and have a source. We're not on an island. We're all doing this we're influencing the housing market, and we're influencing the way that people live their lives in a very significant way. So it's good that we have this this as a resource, and I think it's going to continue to be. And that's why I just talks about why why this continues to grow and continues to be such a success, is because it's really serving a need in the marketplace. So I'm really grateful to be a part of it, and love what you keep building.
Cool. Well, with that said, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit that button, and we will talk to you all tomorrow. We have a great interview episode for you, so you'll want to tune in tomorrow. All right. Talk to you later.